It's really about owning your own stuff where you feel uncomfortable to be more available to other people at a deeper level.
Welcome to Settling's Not an Option. I'm Adam Nebbs and I'm here with my co-host Amanda Stanhope. This show is for anyone out there who feels like they've settled for an unfulfilling life. Whether you've settled in a relationship, the work that you do, or how you feel about yourself, we're here to tell you that settling is not an option. If you're liking the show, please follow us on Spotify, Amazon Music, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have any feedback about the show or want to recommend a topic, you can email us at cheers2notsettling@gmail.com. Finally, if you feel so inclined, you can donate to us on Coffee, where we're aiming to buy some new audio equipment. So today we have a guest by the name of Wendy Nash, who's an accountability and meditation coach from Australia, who helps overworked professionals to achieve their goals. Wendy connected with me on LinkedIn back in March and opened with a big philosophical question, which I loved. I had to go off and have a think about it for a day before I came up with a decent answer. And straight away, I knew that I'd come across someone that I was going to have lots of interesting conversations. So having Wendy on the show was always inevitable for us.
Yeah.
So Wendy is a Buddhist who has a diploma in somatic psychotherapy, a Bachelor of Psychology with honours, and has 18 years of experience in meditation. Welcome to the show, Wendy Nash.
Yes,
Thank you very much. Thank you for letting me come on your program. It's fantastic. I love the direction that you're taking. It's really nice to see mental health being such a priority, and because it's, you know, we have this big thing in society that work is our passion, we should love our work, but when our colleagues are kind of driving us a bit nuts or our boss is being kind of demonic, it's pretty hard to find that passion and fulfillment for sure.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that. So you recently went on a Buddhist Buddhist retreat. Good way to start. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I've never been on a retreat. I'm hearing lots of good things about retreats, but I'm just really curious to know what the experience was like.
Yeah, so it was a bit of a mixed bag. I actually was chatting with a couple of friends the other day about their experience, because they sent around a text going, oh, I felt so nourished. And I looked at the text and thought, of all the things that I would say about any retreat that I have been on, nourished is never one of them. So for me, it's more, I guess I tend to see it more as a way of understanding my mind better. And the more I kind of am honest with myself, the more available I can be for others, emotionally available. So I actually had, I actually came to see that I spent a lot of time kind of denying my own feelings about, I had been sort of using some of the Buddhist stuff like impermanence to avoid connecting with people in a really deep way, or thinking that I could depend on them. And I had been using non-attachment to say, well, I don't need any material goods. I'm kind of above that, which is a kind of a way of what John Well would call spiritual bypassing. And then I'd also been using emptiness, which is a rather abstract term. It's quite complicated. I don't understand it. I thought I did, but I don't. And as kind of saying, well, I don't have a right to exist. I have a bit of survivor's guilt from some family experiences. And it was kind of using Buddhism as kind of, well, I'm above that all, actually. And then I found out that I'm not above it all, and I am equally vulnerable. And then on the last day, so as if I didn't have enough to deal with, so which is why it's not nourishing.
Yeah, I see that.
You have to just own it, and then you know, this is what makes us a better person. So then on the last day, I asked a question, and I was kind of, it's this thing on emptiness. I've been trying to figure it out for a long time, and I thought I had kind of understood it. And then I thought, okay, I'll ask him a question, and I wrote it all down in my book, and I just said, oh, you know, and so I'm wondering if it's this and how is that, and I think what you're saying is this, and I got to the end, and he said, why are you reading it from a book? I don't understand what you're saying. What is this analogy you're using? How could you, like, what do you want from me? What sort of answer do you want? Like, and I just thought, oh, I remembered there's a woman on my course, and she asks questions, and I feel a bit oh, she's a bit dim. She doesn't really kind of get it. And I had some scorn for her. And I was a
Okay.
bit self-righteous, actually.
Okay.
And I thought, oh, she feels humiliated actually all the time. And this is what I feel humiliated. And so I thought of her and I thought, oh my God, how unkind have I been in my thinking towards her? And then I went to my neighbor who used to be a really gregarious person, but she worked in community, what's called Department of Community Services. So she was part of the system that was rescuing neglected and abused children, so taking them from families. So she had 5 strokes, which just nuked her brain. And so she can't speak and to people easily. She gets very frustrated very quickly. And I said, oh, I just feel so humiliated. And she said, oh, I feel like that all the time. That's why I don't talk to people. So I was like, oh my God, this is somebody I've known her now for several years, kind of over a decade. And I had no idea that what she was experiencing was humiliation because she couldn't articulate it. But because of her brain now. But nonetheless, when I articulated it, she really got it. I got in the taxi to go to my partner's because I decided I was going to end the retreat a day early because I was enough of that. I just realized I couldn't absorb what the teacher was.
I'm taking in as much as I can right now. Yeah.
And so I got in the taxi and he talked to me about, I love my taxi rides. So I got in the taxi and this guy talked about something that happened 3 years ago. He was really ashamed that he had done. It took probably 15 minutes. And for 3 years, he had been sitting with the shame of this experience. I just was really able to kind of go, yeah, it's just awful when we feel like we've done the wrong thing. It's just awful. And then I was talking with my partner about my day and how I'd asked this question. And he said, yeah, I go into my meetings with my boss and she just says like really scornful things like, oh yeah, well, you know, I know you try your best, but really. And she just says these things all the time. And I would sort of say that I keep up pretty well with his emotional, what's going on for him, but I hadn't twigged how much humiliation he was experiencing, kind of maybe not daily, but every second day. And and being able to describe that emotion, sort of the kind of, it was like a cancer of the emotions, humiliation, it kind of eats at your gut in that kind of way. And I thought, okay, so the interaction I had with that teacher is very, very learned, very skilled. Instead of doing what I told a couple of friends and they said, oh, he's like a bad guy, how dare he, whatever. But I just sort of, I think because of my practice, I just was able to go, oh, wow, I actually, within 12 hours, I had 4 people who I engaged with, and 3 of them were actually in my daily life. I thought, oh, wow, I'm so much more connected with them. So retreats, you know, are kind of like that. It's not nourishing, it's not pleasant, but I'm a heaps better person for it, you know, like,
I would say that was nourishing. Now, I mean, it might not be the kind of nourishing like you think of, like relaxing or like restorative, but it sure seems like it was nourishing in the long run.
And so that's what it's about. So it's really about being super honest with yourself. So it's not about not getting angry, not feeling humiliated, not feeling sad. It's about going, oh, I do feel really sad, and kind of feeling into the physicality of it. And then you're kind of, the buck is Pema Chodron, I don't know if you've heard of her, but she says the buck stops with you. And so it's like the buck stops here, and then I'm not kind of deflecting out on my shadow self onto others. So so it's not a pleasant, it's not like walking along a beach and having a lovely time and imagining everybody's having happy families, or not like reading a book where you're just going, oh, I'm so relaxed. It's not that. It's really about owning your own stuff where you feel uncomfortable to be more available to other people at a deeper level. Yeah.
No, that sounds awesome. I know, I'm curious to know what the other women that you were talking to who said they felt nourished. I'd be curious to know how they would describe the experience, wouldn't it?
Well, we did talk a little bit about that.
Okay.
They just went, wow, he's so wise.
Mhm.
He's so lovely. He's really advanced on his practice. It was really like such there was a teacher. I went on retreat in 2013 with a really well-regarded teacher in a different tradition, and I didn't respond well to him. I just I felt really uncomfortable. I don't know what it was, but I just felt didn't like him. So I couldn't go anywhere because I'd gone there by bus. No one else was going. So I just sat there and drank tea in the tea room. And then at one point, the people came out of the hall just in this burst, and you could feel like there was this energy.
Okay.
And I said, whoa, what happened? And this one person, she said, oh my God, you should have seen this interaction between the teacher and this student, and oh my God, he has no right to speak with that. So I'm going, whoa, what happened? And wanting the goss, like, oh yeah, he's a real bad guy, because that's what I was thinking. I want someone to keep join in with me, And so I go to the next person, I go, what happened? And I heard it was a bit of a funny interaction. And she said, oh, what? No, I don't remember any interaction. It was just a normal teacher-student interaction. I asked the next person, and then he said, oh yeah, they kind of always do that. Those two, they've been working together for ages. That's just, the next person said, yeah, he was really kind of honing in on a problem that she often has and trying to display that to her.
Right.
So it was like, and that was actually one of the best learnings I have got, a bit like this one with the humiliation. The teachers, they really highlight where your mind is.
Right.
Because I always want to be right, I always want to be sure that I know what's going on.
Yeah.
And actually what this thing, maybe almost 10 years ago now, really showed me is that everybody comes, like you see the same interaction, everybody comes with a different story. It's like having in statistics, you've got data points and how you interpret, where you cut off the outliers, how you work that data.
Right.
Gives you completely different information. So we all come with our story, and that story is valid, but not true.
Right, exactly. Yeah, everybody's interpreting it their own way.
Yeah, we're really loaded with the story.
Yeah. Exactly.
So keep that loose, I think. So these women found it really loving and nourishing, but it was completely different to mine.
Yeah, but it sounds like to me you got a lot out of it.
Yeah, huge. Yeah. Absolutely.
So as a Buddhist retreat, so I don't know anything about Buddhism really. Is that something you do regularly? Like, is that part of the practice that you would do that regularly, or is that just something you've chosen to do?
No, I think any serious practitioners, certainly in what's called the convert communities, which is the upper middle way, they call it, which is sort of the upper middle class, white, I think it's quite common in America, so you might know the names, Joseph Goldstein, Jack Kornfield, Sharon Salzberg.
They sound familiar, yeah.
Yeah, so these are kind of that white convert demographic, where people, they're not the majority of Buddhists. Most Buddhists are Sri Lankan or Laos or Thai or Tibetan or or maybe not Japanese so much, Korean, or there are many other where Buddhism is actually the dominant religion.
Right, where they're born into it rather than converting to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So as a kind of, but the white convert, this is what we tend to do. We tend to go on a weekend, a week, retreat. Maybe 3 years retreat. I know a few people who do that, and that's in the Tibetan tradition. So it's pretty intense.
Is it 3 year long retreat?
3 years.
Oh my gosh. I would say that's pretty intense. Yeah.
So that is kind of what we do, and it's really good in this kind of very productive orientated society that we live in, where you're kind of achieving and aiming, so it gives you a bit of space around that kind of way.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not so common in the like what they'd call the born Buddhist, like Sri Lankans,
Sure.
where that's much more about reflecting sort of, yeah, it's a bit like how you would imagine Christian priests 100 years ago in Western
Okay.
society.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
One of the, and I was going to ask this a bit later of you, but one of the traits that you display probably better than anyone else I know, and I've got so much more of an appreciation for this now because Amanda taught it to me after I was just quite blind to it, is just this fierce openness, you know, because what can happen, especially if you say go to a retreat like that and you feel humiliated and you leave, and like that would be really tough. And
Mhm.
most people would just walk away and all they could be consumed by is just negative emotions. But you've gone off, you've had all these different interactions with people, reflected, and it's actually turned out to be quite an amazing experience. And I think because you were fiercely open to, all right, well, what's going to come out of this? Why has it gone the way it has? Similar to the experience you had, 10 years ago. But yeah, I just wonder, like, because I know obviously this has been something you've practiced for a long time, but how can people get that openness? Because I think it's so hard for people to be open like that. It certainly took me a long time.
Mhm.
It's not like everybody doesn't feel humiliated sometimes.
Sure.
Mm.
If I say the word humiliation, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I think the one that is really, really good to remember is when you say you're lonely.
Okay.
If you were the only person who was lonely, no one else would understand what that word meant when you said it. Everybody knows what it feels like to feel lonely.
Right. So there's like some universal feelings that everybody can recognize. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, I think when we are really lonely, we think we're the only one who feels like that. But
Right.
actually everybody feels like that. So it's actually really easy to go up to people and go, I feel really lonely.
Mhm.
And people go, yeah, I felt like that way too. I mean, it's very few people who would be hard-hearted against that. Maybe as a child, we might have been bullied or teased or something or denigrated for having that, don't be man enough or whatever, you're too sensitive. But as adults, actually, we're much nicer to adults than we are to children. So in many ways, because we just go, yeah, well, I know that feeling. Well, I've been there. So
Yeah, true.
to me, it's just remembering that everybody else has been there too. So that's the real thing, I think.
So it seems to
So
me
true.
like what you're saying, and maybe this isn't what you're saying and you can correct me, but
Yeah.
is that really the only way to do it is just to do it. Like you just have to, like, one day just make yourself vulnerable enough and maybe find the right person where you feel safe with them to be vulnerable. And once you find out you survived that experience, you can do it again more easily the next time. So
Yeah, I've had a lot of therapy. I just want to put in there. I had a very complicated childhood where I just did not feel I could be vulnerable.
Sure.
And because of all that scorn and self-righteousness and humiliation, that was
Sure.
really a very complicated personal circumstances that I think a lot of people have experienced, but now we're more open about disclosing. And so when my therapist, she's very skilled and she just let me say it. And
Yeah. Yep.
she herself had owned her own shame. And I think that's a really difficult one to own, is when we feel shame.
True. Yeah.
But I was like, wow, I just feel a ton of shame about this. And, like not everything goes through my head is good, it's kind, it's
Well, yeah.
polite, So I had to practice on her, and
Sure.
then I practiced on my friend. And then, but you can, if you're in a Buddhist community or something, you can just practice. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Because
Very
that's
few
part
people.
of the culture within the
Yeah.
community. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
and yeah, I think so. And there are people you shouldn't be like that weird.
Well, of course. Yeah.
Don't start with family members.
That's true. No, that's a good point though, really. Because a lot of people would start there.
Well, if you have a good relationship with a family member, why not? But if, like me, it's been a bit more complicated and you've spent time being away from them because you found them a little bit difficult, definitely don't do that. You know, it's about understanding the difference between being honest and disclosing. And it was a psychoanalyst called Nancy McWilliams who described that line. You know, always really important to be honest. Don't always have to disclose. And I think Brene Brown has started to look at that. Yeah.
I was just thinking of that when you said that, because she says, what does she call it? Oversharing, or like vulnerability is not oversharing. They're not the same thing. Or she says something like that.
Yeah, just vulnerability doesn't mean you are without boundaries.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yep. Yeah, I know, it's funny because as soon as you said that, her name popped into my head. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's really fascinating though, because I feel like those two concepts are really, like, people perceive them to be intertwined. So it's like, all right, obviously vulnerable. And you see some videos, and it's not to downplay maybe the cases that are quite authentic and maybe healing for some people, but you know, there's almost like a movement towards like, okay, I'm gonna jump on camera and be incredibly vulnerable, you know, cry and do all these things. And sometimes it's like, oh, I don't know if this is serving the purpose. Like, are you doing this as clickbait, or are you doing this for healing purposes? Because I don't think you're gonna, you know, like jumping on Instagram or LinkedIn, I don't think that's the way to heal. I think, as you said, you do need to probably go away and sit with somebody, maybe, you know, start with someone impartial who can reflect things back on you. But I'm noticing that Amanda and I have talked about it a little bit, and it's like, it's good to maybe open up online, because you're seeing more and more people now talking about languishing and the difficulties of COVID and stuff, which I think is really good, you know, and it's Men's Health Week at the moment, so there's more discussion around men's mental health issues. That's good. But then I think, yeah, as you said, you can go too far and all of a sudden be really oversharing, and people get uncomfortable, and then it actually kind of, I think, does the opposite of what maybe you hope it does, you know?
Well, right, exactly. Yeah. Well, then you're opening yourself up to be humiliated, I would think.
Yeah.
I think, you know, you're always going to be open to be humiliated.
Sure.
You can ask a question and and somebody's just going to take offense to it, or they have their own sensibilities or sensitivities, whatever. You know, I was thinking about that thing about Instagram, and I was watching a television program recently about the Byron Instagram thing. Adam, you may be more aware of this.
Not too familiar, no.
There was a program about Instagrammers in Byron Bay, and how they're kind of like this lifestyle or whatever, and you know, and the women who were interviewed on that, so I'm not an Instagrammer, I'm not in that kind of thing. They actually talked about how much support they got from their communities, and how that actually they were giving initially, and that's what kind of thing. And then they talked about their postnatal depression, and people were just like, oh, I'm so glad you talked about it.
Sure.
I can see you're completely falling apart, and me too, I've been there too. And so they found themselves being really supported by it. So I think what I learned in that experience on that retreat a decade ago was everybody has a different perspective. And what is treasure for me is rubbish to you, you know. So I think we don't have to say everything, but maybe sometimes it touches a nerve for somebody, and it's just that thing that they need to hear. I don't know.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
And so I was going to ask you a question originally about some of the key teachings of Buddhism. And I think, you know, after you and I had a quick chat, it's probably quite a big ask, really, to encapsulate a huge spiritual practice and be like, right, Wendy, you are now the Dalai Lama and you must tell us all the details. No, but what I was thinking, instead of maybe flipping it to, because we have talked in the past, you and I, a little bit about some of these concepts of emptiness. And I love the fact that you've gone on a retreat thinking you knew about emptiness, and then you're like, no, I've got some work to do. That's great. Again, tying into that, you know, that fierce openness kind of thing. But I'm just wondering, like, maybe some of the teachers that have translated into your life and helped you that maybe could help others, if you could maybe unpack that. Hopefully that question's kind of articulate.
So if I've understood your question correctly, sort of who are the good teachers? Something there?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, where to start maybe if you want to move into a Buddhist practice.
Okay. I think it's, so that is a question that people do get asked, a lot. And I've asked that of people. And I think the thing that was the best advice I was given is join a community and then see the interactions of the people between each other.
Okay.
If you find that they are supportive and kind, so there's one which is a bit controversial because of the way they recruit people, but their whole thing is working with racism in America.
Okay.
And they spend their practice is focused on bodhicitta, and it's bodhisattva practice. And that is that when you have somebody who is unwell, that you support them. So that's their practice.
Okay.
But maybe that's not what's going to work for you. You feel like you're already doing too much, so that's not going to be your thing. Maybe you're more interested in the intellectual. Maybe. So you just go with what you feel is the people in the community are doing. And I think, there is a lot of stuff about male teachers having sex with female students or other men. So I think just be aware of any sense of favoritism or any sense of being on the clique, on the inner crowd, or anything like that. So I think that's a good frame, but I don't think it, and everybody comes with different dispositions. So what works for me, so I was with a community for about 10 years and I really liked it because it was really good on the social stuff, and I was learning how to trust people after all these difficult times. So I moved overseas and I went to that same community in that town, but I had a bad interaction. So I ended up not being able to feel comfortable in that. And then I went in different ways. So it's not so much about which teacher, but which community I feel is the right one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it
sounds
changes.
like it's just like different. So I was raised Christian. I mean, I don't practice, but there's different denominations within Christianity. There's all kinds of, there's Christian Reformed, Netherlands Reformed, there's like all these different denominations. And it sounds like that's similar maybe to what you're talking about, where each community has its own philosophy in a way, or their own way of interpreting the teachings. Yeah.
Yeah, and like if you think about Christianity, how it goes from, like one of the things that I thought was so interesting about Christianity is that the teachings of Jesus Christ went south to Africa as much as they went west and north.
Yeah.
I thought that was, so actually Christianity in Africa has been around for 1,000 years. So the Christianity in Africa, in those communities, is very different to the Christianity in Ireland or in Russia or in Serbia. Like they're all very different communities and very different to the Christians. So they've sort of, there was a famous, I don't know, it's that awkward thing about theft of some scrolls from in China, in the desert in China. It's called the Donhuang Caves. And they ended up in the British Museum. It's, it's one of those cultural things that happened as part of colonization. And anyway, and they turned out that they had mapped those things from several hundred years ago, sort of the similarities between Christianity and Buddhism. So that says that Christianity was in China 1,000 years ago because of the what's now called the Silk Route, this trade route.
Oh, right.
So,
right. Yeah.
So, like Buddhism is exactly the same. So if you're in Tibet, there are like 8 different main groups, +++. And then you're in, and some of them are more political than others. Then you've got Laos and Sri Lanka, and they're different. And then you've got this. So it's not only that the denomination is different, but also that, you know, you have teachers in those communities, and some of them are kinder than others.
Sure.
Some people have a better interpretation of it. So this teacher that I was on retreat with last week, it was an online retreat, and he, people were like, wow, he's amazing, he's really advanced. No, it's just not working for me, because I hear the self-righteousness, and I've had an unpleasant interaction with him, so I don't like him anymore.
Right.
But he's extremely, I mean, he's an amazing scholar and teacher,
Right.
and he does his best to integrate. But for me, it's not going to work.
Yeah, I got you. Yep.
So that's a kind of a long-winded way of saying you've kind of got to go with a bit like dating, you know.
Sure. Well, how did you come across Buddhism? Because I assume you're converted, you were not born into it, right? So how did you come across it?
Oh, so I was raised atheist, except that we had to go to church on Christmas Day because we had to understand that Christmas was more than getting presents.
Okay.
So that was the only Christian kind of thing my family did. I went to this therapist because I was kind of a mess after my divorce, and she said, wow, you are so wound up. And she was a very strong Zen practitioner.
Okay.
So she said, you need to take up meditation. And it was just exactly the right thing at the right time. Yeah.
So that's where it started, was with the meditation.
Yeah. And, you know, like, I think that, you know, what has been really good for me is kind of understanding that thing about honest disclosure, which is things like, I'm never quite sure why I'm so determined to think that I'm always right, given how often I'm wrong. You know, like, you know, how many times do we go, oh, I wasn't expecting that. That's another way of saying I was wrong.
Yeah.
So, like, how many times in a day are you wrong about what you think is going to happen?
Yeah.
Actually, and so why you think you're always going to be right? No, I was so determined to think I was going to be right. You know, so would I rather be right or be happy? So
Right.
I was just like, I would be happy. So yeah.
Well, then we talked about one time, and I don't remember how this came up, but we were talking one time about how there was some statistic about 50% of your memories are wrong. Like, you remember things. So not only are you predicting the future incorrectly, you're remembering the past incorrectly as well. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So yeah, you got to just stop taking yourself so seriously, I think, is part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like because the thing about memory is that it's in the present. So we're remembering in this moment, with this mood, with this disposition, with our nerves in the way that they are, or our minds in the way they are, about those experiences back then.
Right.
But it's actually in this moment that you're remembering. And it's the same about when you're thinking about the future. It's in this moment that you're thinking about I look like I'm praying, sorry about that. It's in this moment that you're thinking about the future, but actually it's in this moment. Yeah. So that's Eckhart Tolle who talks a lot about that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. One of our favorite, one of the sponsors of the show, Eckhart Tolle.
Our sponsors. You should be as much as
we just mentioned him. We mention him so much, I think. But I just want to kind of like reinforce a point, because it's interesting what you say about, you know, different leaders and communities and denominations and cultures, because I am always really scared of this idea of, say, Eckhart Tolle or other leaders that I love, that really, you know, if I'm having a really bad trot, I'm like, right, go back and listen to The Power of Now, or, you know, or A New Earth, because it always grounds me in it, you know, time after time, no matter how much I listen to it. But I've always thought, I don't think I'd ever want to meet some of these people for fear of, what if I have a bad interaction? Because as you say, maybe, you know, 95% of people will say, oh, Eckhart Tolle is wonderful. He's, you know, but maybe we just don't click because, you know, those things happen. And then all of a sudden for me, all of that like healing and go-to is gone, because, you know, I think it would be then coupled with this, you know, oh, I had this bad interaction. So I think that's something as well, which was interesting, because what, you know, Wendy and I spoke about another leader, which I won't mention on here just because he might be listening. You know, we've got so many big influencers listening, right. But, you know, like another leader that I listened to on a podcast and I went, wow, what an amazing person. But you didn't have such a great interaction with that person. And it just made me think, again, reinforcing that point, that You know, maybe sometimes you don't want to meet your idols because they might not be what you think they are, and that could be damaging to you, you know?
So the question is really about not so much about them, but there's some utopian ideal about how you imagine that person is.
Yes.
You know, like I remember I was lying awake. I went through a bad stage of insomnia before I started drinking 2 liters of water a day. I used to get really insomniac. I found out that a friend of mine said, yeah, just drink 2 liters of water a day and that'll fix that. So I was like,
Really?
okay, well, in a way, it's really fixed it. So that was just me, you know, different people are awake at the wee hours for different things. But I remember, and I was awake at 3 o'clock in the morning and I started listening to the crap going on in my head, you know.
Mm.
And then I started going, so what is that? What are all those conversations about? And I thought, I'm always really good. I'm the good guy here, you know. And how well, if they don't see me as a good guy, that's because they're idiots. And if I behave in a way that is not kind, then well, they haven't understood, they don't really get me, you know. So it was all really, really one-sided. And so I started kind of investigating. So what is this kind of idea about what is a good person? I did this real investigation 3 o'clock in the morning, nothing else to do. What is a good person? And I thought, okay, so the essence for me about what is a good person is somebody who is kind. That's like, for me, you know, like, are they sensitive and kind?
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, am I sometimes kind? Yeah, I am. Okay. Am I sometimes unkind?
Right.
Yeah, I am. Is anyone ever 100% of the time kind or 100% of the time unkind?
Right.
No, actually. Even people who are torturers get sick. So, and they get nurtured by their family. This big thing in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, actually, during the end of apartheid, that these wives had to divorce their husbands because they'd always seen them as really good family men, but then they found out that their husbands were torturers.
Yeah.
So it was a really huge, huge problem for them. So we think that someone is entirely good. And so the question I would ask you, and it's my own journey because I tend to, you know, this is what I do too, is to just think, well, they've got to be 100% good, or then none of their word is correct. Right. And what I noticed in this experience with this guy last week on retreat is I still think he's an extremely good scholar. I still think he's a very advanced practitioner. I just don't want, I feel just hurt, and I'm a bit nervous about being hurt again. That's all.
Right.
So I think it's really about speaking to the idea about what is your expectation that the other person is going to be like 100%, that they're never going to be a bit snappy with someone. You know, the Dalai Lama, the Bodhisattva of compassion, the Buddha of compassion, says his biggest thing is he has to work on his anger with his staff. And I've seen it on retreats and things where I've seen him interact with his Tibetan, like in the Western, he's like, whoa. But with the Tibetan community, I don't understand Tibetan, but he's clearly going, no, come on, now don't do that, don't do that, don't do this. No, you should have thought about this. He's got that whole tone of voice. So he's not always kind, you know? What hope is there for us?
Because and that's such an interesting point as well. Are people 100% kind? No, we're human beings. So even the Dalai Lama and Eckhart Tolle can't be. You know, they're going to have moments where maybe somebody might not have a great interaction with them. So maybe then, because I guess the thought that I had off the back of it was listening to an audiobook, you know, which is like this beautifully presented, no flaws, just, you know, a nice, you know, like book that he spent, you know, obviously ages and ages writing and doing all that. So I guess that's the thing maybe, is that it's like this manufactured version of people, which isn't true. So maybe that's the thing, is I'm so used to this book where, you know, everything he says is perfect, but then that's not a reflection of reality. So maybe it's more of a think about those thoughts in that context, maybe something like that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's kind of Instagram. actually. I hadn't thought about it,
Right.
but I thought it's actually a kind of Instagram. Do people
Really?
find it incredibly inspiring and helpful? Yes. Do you think that sometimes he probably gets constipated, so he probably gets a bit crabby? Like, what would I know about this?
Yeah.
But we all get a bit tired and grumpy, and why would he be any different?
Right.
Yeah, I like that. Just remember people are human. So that's good. I can see the common thread throughout this, which is really lovely.
Yeah, really, it is. You're right. There is a common thread. Yeah.
There is, yeah, which is nice.
What is the common thread? I don't know what the common thread is.
I think the common thread would be really just having, it's openness, I think, which is just being open to every experience. And, here I am thinking, okay, spiritual leaders, I don't want to meet them because I'd be worried that they're not going to be what I think they're going to be. But then but the question really is like, well, why do I think that they're going to be this, 100% kind, perfect human being when there's no perfect human being? So, it's just being open constantly and questioning and challenging your beliefs, which could be really flawed and harmful to yourself and others. So, but yeah, I really appreciate that kind of chain of thought.
And sorry, I was gonna
no, you go. Sorry.
say something about that, which was I suddenly gone blank about it. I've forgotten what it was. I'm so
No
sorry.
problem. We do that all the time. So,
Yeah.
like it'll come
We're
back.
human beings, like.
Oh, I just saw your mug. I didn't notice that before.
I didn't know if I was allowed to promote.
Yes, I like it.
No, do it. No,
Perfect.
definitely.
We'll have to come back to that because Adam had a question though.
Well, I was just going to kind of pivot the conversation a little bit, and I suppose it is kind of connected in a way, which is obviously you have 18 years of experience in meditation, and I imagine a lot of these thoughts that you have probably come from sitting down and focusing on your thoughts. And as you said, at 3 a.m., sitting down and going, what are the conversations happening? That's a mindful practice. People wouldn't normally do that, unless they're being mindful. Can you maybe talk us through some common misconceptions around mindfulness and what you've learned, to hone your practice to get to the point you are now?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So, like, I just to tell you where I was and the journey that I've gone through from my own kind of having to sit there and own my own crap.
Right.
And I had to learn to be kind about my crap, which I think is why I call the company that name. I started. It's true that before I had sort of taken up meditation properly, I did a one-day meditation thing. And in the morning, we did the breath counting one, and in the afternoon, we did the loving kindness meditation. At the end of the loving kindness meditation, the teacher said, so how did you go with that? And I was kind of like, I guess I've always been pretty honest, to be honest, and maybe a bit too disclosing. But anyway, so I said, wow, I didn't realize I hated absolutely everybody. And
Oh, gosh.
I actually had a lot of anger management issues, which is what was kind of, I think, probably what my therapist was saying. You need to tone down, because I would just have outbursts, and it's a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
So I would have these outbursts. And last year I was in Amsterdam in March, and we went in on the 28th of February before COVID. And so after 2 weeks, they finally told us there was this COVID thing. And since I was in Amsterdam and probably about 40% were in Europe, everybody else had to get on a plane. They said, we're going to have to end the retreat early. It was a month-long retreat. And I looked, so we were organized by geography, and I looked at a couple of the other people in the room, and they were really, really angry.
Okay.
And I'm not the angry one here. Oh wow, that's amazing. I'm like, not angry at all. I'm just really grateful I've got 2 weeks of an amazing retreat, which I've learned a whole lot of stuff about. And then I was talking with a friend of mine on that retreat who's a psychotherapist who's with 30 years experience. And I said, I'm not the angry one anymore. I've only known him for a few years. And he said, you angry? I thought, oh, wow, I've come a long way. In basically 15 years, I had gone from having massive anger management
Right.
to you angry, and people say I'm serene. So I think that's really,
I get that vibe, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say I could see that for sure. Yes, absolutely.
yeah. Well, I wasn't always, people call me a bitch often. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I've been called that a couple times myself, so yes. I understand that. But no, yeah, I know exactly what you mean though. Yeah, because I used to, I mean, I didn't have deep-seated anger management issues, but I definitely used to lose my temper a lot more easily than I do now. Like it's very rare for me to lose my temper now.
Yeah, I also think of you as the serene person. So when you talk about bitch Amanda, I'm like, who's that? Like, I just can't picture it. But
It
And
depends.
it's really, it is really hard to give up these identities, because I
Yeah.
sort of still think of myself as kind of that person who no one's going to like, to
Okay.
kind of like, people want to know me. And actually, at some level, I actually find it really unsettling, because I go,
Yeah.
they might not like me after a while. Oh no, I've got to be on best behavior. And I get really nervous.
No, yeah, I
So,
can understand that.
so it has its another side. But you asked about misconceptions. I think one of the big misconceptions is that you have to sit for 20 minutes or an
Yeah.
hour or whatever. You have to do these formal retreats or whatever. But basically, you can do it anywhere. So a bit like, so if you're standing waiting for the kettle to boil and making a tea or a coffee or something, actually, just to calm your mind, you can just take Andrew Holacek does a great meditation. He calls it the one breath meditation.
Okay.
It is breathe in, breathe out. One breath meditation, not technical.
Right.
So, and if you just do a few of those, it just brings down the thing. So you don't have to sit. You can stand in the supermarket queue.
Yeah.
And just as you try and calm, or pay attention to how irritated you are that person is just taking forever, and why is she, it happened the other day in the supermarket, in that grocery store, and this woman was just really flustered, the poor thing. She was clearly new on the job, and just going, yeah, I'm really, really pissed off actually. So this is taking forever. And I could feel myself starting to blame her, people, her colleagues, her bosses, so yeah, so just that. So that's one.
Yep.
Another one is that you have to start with having a clear mind. So people have this idea, I can't meditate because I just, my mind goes everywhere. So one of my teachers, I can't remember what the acronym is, but basically number of distractions per session. So I think it calls distractions per minute. So DPM. And he says, well, in the beginning, you don't notice how many times you're distracted. But then after a while, you realize you're distracted all the time, and you kind of, it's that. So it's more about it's about training the mind to observe when it is distracted.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about not having distraction. It's just about training the mind to come back to the distraction. Go.
Oh, no, I was just, say yeah.
Okay, and often the way that I find that is to go, oh, what was the underlying emotion with that? And often there's like an emotion that wants to be heard, and then I just go, yeah, I'm really pissed off, or yeah, I feel hurt. Not so much about the storyline, but just I feel hurt. So that's that one. I think another one is that you have to be nice to everybody. Like it just you're so nice that you let people walk all over you.
Sure.
And it's definitely not that. Like what I'm aware of, so my partner the other day, he kind of got in a bit of a huff about something, and I had to kind of go, what was going on there? Now, or sometimes he might speak a bit sharply to me, so I go, oh, what was that all about? And so it's more about catching that and saying, actually, I'm not happy about the way you spoke with me. I want you to reflect upon that, what was going on for you. So it's not saying you can just walk all over me. It's really saying, what is in my mind? How can I live well? But that's not that's not being walked over, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
You've both got kids. Can you imagine what it'd be like if you didn't say you're being unkind?
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
like that's not going to raise a good kid, you know.
Right.
So I think people have this idea that that's okay, it means you can just be walked over, and that's definitely not the case. But nor is it a way of saying you're an idiot, you're a fool, and you're stupid. That's not kind either. So it's really about finding that line about, well, what is going to bring about the best wellness in this? Somebody who's being unkind, maybe a family member who is, they see you and they just, rubbish comes out of their mouth. Better actually to disconnect from that family member, because their behavior, it's actually not being kind to their own mind. They are not being kind in their own mind,
Yeah.
and you're just the trigger of that. So then you have to disconnect and be judicious, even though it causes hurt sometimes. So yeah, and I think it is also about, it's not about detaching yourself from life, or only going for the good stuff, or saying I don't have any material needs, or I don't, somehow detaching. It's actually about being a bit like what I was saying a bit earlier, that I realized that I'd actually been spending a lot of time denying my own my own feelings and my own yearnings for deeper relationships.
Right.
And material possessions, because I thought, no, well, I've got to deny that I have any need. And actually, I just didn't want to feel sad.
Okay.
And so I think that denial and sad can, well, for me, they often sit together. So I think if you're detaching from, I know a lot of people who go into Buddhism and they take up meditation, and they're using the meditation to avoid relationships.
Yeah.
It's about having better quality relationships, deeper relationships, warmer relationships, kinder relationships, not detaching or avoiding or any of that. So I think that's really the basic pitfalls.
No, that's a great summary. Yeah.
No, I think that's a like a very good list of the misconceptions. And another one I'd think, and I think we spoke about it maybe on the mindfulness kind of episode that we had, was I'd listened to Geelong Tupten, who wrote a book, and I think he's quite regarded as someone who's very good at mindful practice. But he specifically talked about how he went into meditation, and it almost became a drug for him, and he would just go into it wanting the high of it. You know, if he didn't come out with that kind of transcendental feeling, he would feel like a failure and get frustrated. And, you know, how you can use mindful practice just like you'd use any kind of recreational drug, you know, you can abuse it. But I think that's what you say is very interesting as well, just especially that point, you know, about recognizing your emotions and not feeling like you need to bury them. Because I think I find any time that I, you know, don't recognize that my brain or, you know, is sending me a thought or an emotion, and that I need to at least acknowledge it. I might not want to, but I need to. That makes me feel a lot better, because otherwise it just seems to build up and just eat away at you. So, you know, you've just got to listen to your brain, because it's sending you these things for a reason. And I think the best way to do it is, as you say, through like mindful practice. So,
Yeah.
And did you have anything to add to that, Amanda?
No. No. I would have said pretty much the same thing you did. But in the interest of time, because I'm our timekeeper.
Yeah.
So, in the interest of time, I do want to, I don't know what else you had on your list, but I do want to know about the kindly cut the crap, and like where that name came from. And what that's all about, because we have to address that before we end things here.
Thanks. So I was thinking about cut the crap, but I thought it was a bit harsh. I sort of, you know, so people, it is really about being honest, but not being brutal, I think. And so I think that I'm hoping that that's where the thing comes in. One of the things that I noticed is that people, just a few things I've noticed about is that people want to want to be different, but they don't want to change. They don't want
Oh,
to change
right.
anything, but they want it to be different. And so it's like, well, let's really look at that. Because you can't change unless you're going to give up something up or defer it. So that's kind of my first question is, well, if you want to change and you want to live a healthier body, and, you know, I think there's such a drive for productivity and outcomes that we forget that actually the head and the body are kind of the same part of the same system.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I've been really focusing on kind of building up the infrastructure so that you can live well and be happy and be a kinder person to yourself and also to others. So I've got a client and he has a tendency to stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning watching Netflix because he just he works really hard during the day. He's a CEO. And so he kind of goes, yeah, but I want to reward myself. But then he's really crabby the next day. He feels really worn out. And so it's really just going, okay, well, is there another way you can reward yourself?
Right.
And
are you really rewarding yourself? No, cut the crap. You're not really rewarding yourself.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, but trying to avoid being too brutal, because I can be a bit brutal. So that's my history of being quite brutal. So I have to manage that a little bit. So yeah, so I tend to work on that sort of stuff where you know how it is. You're supposed to eat properly, exercise 3 times a week, meditate daily, drink 2 liters of water, go to bed at a sensible time. Who does it?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, we all have good reasons to not do it. I mean, we're all good at coming up with good reasons, you know, to talk ourselves out of doing what we know we should do, or to justify, like he was justifying that action by, you know, saying that was a reward for him.
Yeah. So one of the things I did when I was going through my divorce and, you know, really unhappy and everything, is I was drinking too much alcohol.
Okay.
And then what I realized I really liked was the first sip.
Yeah.
So when I socialize, I just have the first sip and then I'm not really interested in the rest of it. And so that's saying, well, I can have a reward, but I'm not really so interested in the side effects. And I'm sort of quite interested in this idea of that we've got this reward system that has kind of really seeped into society in the last 30 years. But do we need to reward ourselves for, I don't know, stuff so much? I don't know.
Right. No, that's an interesting thought too. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. No, very interesting. And if people want to find out more about your business, where are the key points they can go to?
So I've got a website, kindlycutthecrap.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I post rather frenetically on LinkedIn. I'm a bit neglectful of my website. They're the 2 places. I'm not a huge, I don't do Instagram or the other social media.
Sure.
Just two's enough.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I don't do any others besides LinkedIn either. I've tried, but yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Oh, it's been fun. It's been a fun chat. I hope I haven't talked too much or
No, is there anything that you had thought coming into today that you wanted to leave people with that you didn't get a chance to say?
No, I think I just really appreciate, I guess that this is my question to you actually about the podcast and this direction of podcasts and everything. I've worked in a lot of offices and I've seen the behavior of CEOs. Sure. And I've worked with people who are psychopathic.
Okay.
And different types of psychopathy. I think it's unfortunate we kind of clump everybody together, but some people actually have no empathy.
Yeah.
Or they have much more selective empathy than others. And I'm not sure that they necessarily have the capacity to understand that other people aren't actually interested in working 1 million hours a week. Right. And can kind of be quite scornful. And so I wanted to know what your thoughts were about how can the mindfulness or how can these really positive workplace practices be integrated into workplaces when they're headed up by people who are psychopathic not interested. There's kind of lip service with wellness. You know, it's a tick box exercise, and yeah. So where people use mindfulness to be more productive. You know,
Right.
as opposed to being kind to people. So
Right.
yeah, I'd be really curious to understand about. That's my question to you,
Sure.
I guess.
Well, I would see it as there would have to be someone below. So say the CEO is a psychopath, or the one who shows no empathy, feels no empathy. Someone below them is going to have to take the stand on that. And I think if someone, so I guess you'd have to go into, you wouldn't go to the CEO and try to change them. That's not going to happen. If you want to change the workplace environment, I think you'd have to start at a much lower level even. And I think it would trickle up if you could get the right people to start practicing that, because these people aren't, not everybody's interacting with the CEO on a daily basis either. So that's how I would see it working. What do you think, Adam? I think you'd almost have to start from the bottom up or something like that, or from the middle for sure.
Well, I know that leadership, like top leadership commitments, essential for any kind of promotive practices. And it's a good question too, because the reality is some CEOs might not be interested at all. But yeah, I guess it's like, maybe it ties into the leadership stuff that Simon Sinek talks about, and that, ultimately maybe others need to step up as leaders, and figure out, can we change the CEO? Can we do it ourselves, despite the CEO? Or I don't know, the reality for me, and, something that I've witnessed firsthand in my previous job is, does that person need to go? And do we need to rally the troops to say this person's not appropriate? And I've seen that work, and it's scary. People get very scared and worried about it. But I think, if this person is toxic and really putting a harm on the organization and the people under them, then maybe that is the right decision to take, and we shouldn't shy away from it. But it's a tricky one. But unfortunately, probably the reality for a lot of businesses where people don't have a lot of compassion. And even just one kind of concluding thing, I there's somebody that I listen to quite a lot who's like a real good role model in terms of talking about psychological health and safety. And I heard these people really talking down spiritual practices, things like spiritual healing and chakras and things like that. And it was just very surprising for me to hear that, because I thought, really, like, why are the role models so closed off to some of these other compassionate practices as well? So even the people that are meant to be our role models sometimes are a bit flawed. So keeping that in mind, which maybe that's a bit of a tangent to what your question was.
No, but
yeah, like I'm really interested in the question of self-denial. I mean, that's where the problem sits, I think, really, for all of this. And that's, I think, why I like the meditation stuff, is because you actually get to the point where it's like, well, what's the best question to ask when you've got a problem, which is, what am I not seeing about this?
Sure.
And then if you start off your meditation practice with that, if you do have a formal meditation practice, or even if you've got a long drive or a run or something like that, you do your run, and you ask yourself that question, sometimes the answer comes back really like, you're being a horrible person. And that's quite, what you want to hear.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. Yeah. And I guess that's kind of what I was saying in a way, is that if you want your environment to change, you have to change yourself first. You don't set out trying to change other people. That's not going to happen. All you can do, in my opinion, is try to better yourself, try to set a good example, and hope that other people are going to follow your example. But you can't, there's no guarantee that they're going to, and you can't make them. So, yeah.
Exactly.
All right, so we're ready to wrap things up. Yeah. All right. So we would say thank you so much, Wendy, for spending some time with us and sharing all of your thoughts and experiences. We really appreciate it, and we're so glad we were able to make this happen. And for anybody who's stuck around this long, we really appreciate you being out there listening and watching. And of course, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music. You can send us an email at cheerstoNotSettling@gmail.com, or find us on LinkedIn if you'd like to get a hold of us. And of course, you can always head on over to Coffee, where you can donate as little as $1 to help us keep this thing going. That's all our plugs, I believe. So until next time, we will say cheers to not
Cheers to not
settling.
settling. Bye.
Here.
It was an honor. Thanks so much.
Oh, you're so welcome.